You're probably familiar with the term training to failure, but what does that actually mean and how should you apply it to your own workouts? There's actually 4 relevant types of failure when it comes to training. The first one is psychological failure. Basically, giving up from the set because it's uncomfortable, because it burns, so your mind gives up before your body actually comes to its limit. For example, you're doing squats and you give up on rep number 10 because it burns, even though you had enough strength to hit 15 reps. You gave up too soon because it felt hard. That's the psychological failure. Next is cardiovascular failure. It's when your lungs and heart are so tired and your cardiovascular system is limiting you from going any further with your set. This tends to happen if you're doing lots of reps on compound lifts, such as squats, deadlifts, stuff like that. You get tired and out of breath that you can't keep going even though your muscles have a lot of energy left. You just don't have enough endurance for it. If that's the limiting factor, then you won't be able to create a good muscle stimulus. And that's the problem if you're training for muscle growth. Next is technical failure. This is when you can't perform any more reps without breaking your technique. So when you cannot do another rep with the full range of motion while maintaining good technique, it means that you've reached technical failure. Here it's important that the limiting factor is the specific muscle that you're trying to target with the exercise that you're doing. But that's why on every exercise tutorial I mention what muscle groups are working so that you understand what should be the limiting factor. For example, let's say you're doing a back exercise. Let's say you're doing barbell rows. The goal of this exercise is to target your back. But what if your grip strength is not strong enough and you reach technical failure not because your back has reached its limit, but because your grip is giving up on you and you have to let go of the bar, right? Or let's say you're doing squats, but instead of your quads being the limiting factor causing you to reach technical failure, it's actually your lower back. In that case, you can use a belt to alleviate a little bit of stress, but more importantly, you program your workouts in a way that allows your spinal erectors to be fully recovered when it's time for you to squat. Final type of failure is the absolute muscular failure. This is when you squeeze every last drop of energy remaining in the muscle to the point where it cannot move an inch anymore. It's going all out. It's brutal. It can be very uncomfortable. And to get there, you would usually use cheating, partial reps or other type of advanced training techniques. And even with all these techniques, you will never reach 100% failure, but the point is just to push yourself beyond the technical failure and challenge yourself as much as possible. Okay, so out of these 4 types of failure, you should definitely try your best to avoid psychological and cardiovascular failure when training for muscle growth. If you're following our training programs, most of the time you won't have to worry about that because these programs are designed to reduce the chance of that happening based on exercise selection, repetition ranges. But listen, sometimes there's really not much you can do. Like for example, when you're doing leg extensions, it just fucking burns. Your goal is to try to push through that discomfort as much as you can. Anyways, you just have to be aware of this and understand what you're trying to do when you're in the gym. Okay, so almost everything that you do will be in relation to technical failure. You know, that type of failure when you can't do any more reps with the proper technique because the specific muscle that is being trained just can't keep going anymore. Now, let's see how you can apply this to your own training based on your level of experience. You don't actually have to reach that technical failure on every single set. If you're a beginner and you're following our training routines, I recommend training 1 or 2 reps short of failure. First reason for that is that because you're still learning proper technique, so if you try going all the way to the technical failure, your technique will inevitably break down and you will risk getting injured. The second reason is because you don't need to push yourself that hard as a beginner, you're still going to see maximum results anyway. If you're an intermediate, you should definitely start experimenting with technical failure. Do it in a safe way with the safe exercises. For example, machines can be a really good option for this type of training because they are very safe. Also, isolation exercises such as standing biceps curls, calf raises, these are pretty safe to do this type of training. And finally, if you're advanced, it depends. I'd say mainly on how much your joints can take. If you can take most of your sets to failure without needing to deload way too often because your joints hurt, then great, keep doing like that. And finally, if you're advanced or intermediate, you might even use some of the advanced training tactics to reach absolute muscular failure in some cases. We have separate videos for the exact ways on how to do that. But I'd say the biggest problem is that most people underestimate how close to failure they actually are training. They think they're training 2 reps short of failure, but in reality they have like 4 or 5 reps left. So that's why I'm going to demonstrate what it really looks like to train until technical failure and how to go beyond that. We're gonna measure that with the reps in reserve, and I'm going to do standing biceps curls.